When the Asia Cup final took place, Modi tweets about, comparing it to Sindoor.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't know, as a prime minister of a country, can you really be doing this?
You want to make the money,
Yeah.
and then you will do the dirty symbolism of not shaking hands. Oh, so the ball coming from there, the bat, the catching, the fielding, all that is okay on the field.
The whole use of cricket as a tool of this very toxic Hindu nationalism that we are witnessing.
Cricket has the mandalization of our politics, certainly is reflected. You still do not see those, say, Dalits in large numbers in cricket, and still
I don't know of any Dalit actually.
And we know the stories of the Kamble versus Sachin Tendulkar, how it played out.
You look at some of the statements that the Indian cricket coach, the former BJP MP, Mr. Gautam Gambhir, gives. And as a lot of people have pointed out, you look at some of the statements that he was giving against Indian Muslims when he was the BJP MP. How do you expect him to have suddenly changed his views after he's become a cricket coach?
It's a dirty sport run by some people who have the same dirtiness in their conducts.
Hello and welcome to the Caravan Long View. I'm Sushant Singh.
And I'm Hartosh Singh Bal.
Today we are going to discuss something which has been described as an Indian game accidentally discovered by the British, or as India's religion. And religion, as we know, Marx famously said, is opium to the masses. And this is a sport which is opium to the masses. Of course, we're talking about cricket. India is a single sport country almost, and cricket is what Indians are crazy about. But what Hartosh and I want to talk about today is not cricket as a technical sport or as a game and what the intricacies are, or who's scoring more runs, what the averages are. We are more going to discuss it as a phenomena, as a sociological phenomena, as a political phenomena, as economic phenomena, more in tune with what CLR James said about cricket. Life beyond the sport, what cricket tells you about. And in today's India, there are few things, maybe Bollywood to some extent, but it is cricket as a sport, which tells you much more about today's India, the Indian politics, the Indian society, the Indian economy than anything else. Cricket, of course, has become massive. It's monstrous to, in my view, to what it has become as a sport, as a phenomena. And Hartosh, how did it become this big monster that it is today, as we see in India?
First, Sushant, so just to take off tangentially from where you left this and examine this phenomena, the first thing is that clearly there's a history to where we've come. And this history is visible to everybody. At the risk of sounding repetitive in our episodes, and people accuse us of being obsessed with the BJP and Narendra Modi or corporates and corruption. But I mean, that is today the primary facet of cricket, isn't it? What is the supposed temple of cricket in India where all our finals are held? It is called after a certain Narendra Modi, who's the high priest of all cricket administration. It's a certain Jai Shah, the son of Amit Shah. Who is the coach of the Indian cricket team? A Gautam Gambhir, who was a BJP MP. Which is the patron corporate of cricket? That is the Ambanis. In everything, all cricket telecasts, all pipelines, all rights, all television controlled by the Ambanis. This is where we are. This is the ruling government and the ruling sort of corporatocracy between the Ambanis and Andanis, one of the biggest manifestations of power. And I think it has followed a certain trajectory. It was a sport which oscillated between hockey and cricket, our interest as a nation, and maybe more on hockey.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, the moment that marks this departure, a moment which was played out in the best amateur sense of a few people with their belief in themselves, is the 83 World Cup victory, which came out nowhere. It is the story of these pygmies defeating giants, that wonderful West Indies cricket team, to see them lose in the finals to a Kapil Dev-led team. I think it transformed cricket in our imagination, and especially the one-day game. And then it continued, I think, to the Benson Hedges in 85, etc., under Gavaskar, and through the 80s, right for liberalization, which lands in this country in some sense.
No, I completely agree with you. The decline of the Indian hockey, 76 Montreal when India finishes seventh, and then 80, of course, the boycotted Olympics they win, and 84 onwards, the decline in Indian hockey and the simultaneous rise of cricket as a sport, which captures the imagination of the public, supported largely by the Indian media, which focused so much on cricket and cricket stars at that time. In our childhood, in our growing up years, there were so many magazines about cricket. You had Cricket World, our Sports World, in Hindi, there were cricket magazines. In various languages, there were cricket magazines. Cricket was almost like this very social phenomena. If you're growing up, and everybody would be discussing cricket in school, and everybody would be discussing cricket all the time. Imran Khan and Michael Holding and what have you was going on. And then, as you rightly said, it soon comes to a phase at the time of the economic liberalization and the new economic processes that come, where this dominant force is ripe to be captured by what those the forces that are unleashed by the new economic liberal class. So you have the Mark Mascarenas giving Sachin Tendulkar this big contract for $1 million or whatever, and then you have this television rights which come in, and people forget that the first television rights actually came in because of South Africa. So when the first tour is done, the South Africans want to broadcast it at that point in time, and it is the first time they actually pay the BCCI for broadcasting broadcasting cricket on television. Before that, actually, BCCI was paying Doordarshan others for broadcasting cricket, and it is at that point which transforms. And then, of course, the 1996 World Cup, and then the story is known to all of us. And there, to my mind, Atosh, there are parallels between cricket and a lot of other sociological phenomena that India has seen. What are those parallels? How did those parallels come about, and how do we see them reflected in today's India?
See, I think let's take cricket as a parallel to our institutions. As I said, 83 was marked by a certain amateurism, a passion of the game. There was nobody pushing anything. We were following it. We knew the players, knew them individually. Some playing well beyond their talents. People had their own fondnesses. Do you like Vishwanath more than do you like Gavaskar? It was an amateur passion in the best sense of the word. And as money starts entering it, we see a transformation to a certain professionalism. Of course, in the one-day game, players become fitter. It is more athletic, but it is more marketed. It is more shepherded as a spectacle. It is clear before our eyes. By the time we get to the second World Cup victory under Dhoni, it is already seen as some hallmark of India's national assertion. Maybe we are looking at it during the 2004 to the 2009 period where the economy is booming. It is India's time in the world. We've arrived at the world stage. And as its influence and pattern grows, it gets tied to nationalism and politics. The elections become big business. All of it lead to a certain, to me, and it is not nostalgia, the ebbing out of that the amateur spirit that actually motivated the initial interest in the game in some sense.
But Artosh, many would say that the amateur spirit that you talk about was dominated by a very small elite group of upper caste.
Sure.
The whole idea of who your batsmen were and what kind of social background they came from. But that amateur spirit was also reflected of a very elite kind of a worldview, which changes in the particularly in the field of cricket. Now you have people coming from very different kind of social backgrounds than what they were earlier coming on. So that now you don't find English speaking cricketers. You rarely find actually English speaking cricketers. Things what we probably saw in Pakistan post Imran in a certain sense.
So that focus is actually quite interesting, and we do focus on these rags to riches stories, people from small towns, non-English speaking people, and it parallels our politics. Cricket has the mandalization of our politics, certainly is reflected. You still do not see those, say, Dalits in large numbers in cricket, and
I don't know of any Dalit actually.
And we know the stories of the Kamble versus Sachin Tendulkar, how it played out, and in the same way as our politics has expanded, we've also seen especially under the BJP, but it was a trend already in the country, of how the upper caste control of Indian society is reasserted in the larger superstructure of politics. In politics, after all, who is running the country, who controls the union cabinet, whose values motivate cricket. You look at the same cricket administration, you look at the BCCI, you look at who the broadcasters are, who the people who enjoy maximum power and benefits from cricket. That hasn't changed. So you have the people fueling it, the foot soldiers who are making good money and spreading the awareness. But that awareness is being reaped by, again, a certain elite drawn from those same segments that we are talking about as a broadening in some sense.
No, completely. And I don't think many people realize this. And there is data to show that IPL actually is one of the lowest share of athletes in any major sport league globally is in IPL. IPL actually doesn't give all the money that it makes to the athletes, to the players. Every I think it's something like 8% or 12% or something, whereas every other major league gives far more. The athletes have a greater say and a greater control over the kind of money that they can make out of this thing. So while the numbers in IPL look big and we see 15 crore, 18 crore, 20 crores being flashed out, and I am personally, not a fan of these auctions being conducted and people being treated like cattle in any case.
That's a spectacle again.
It's a spectacle, and spectacles, as a spectacle it may work, but really in terms of human dignity, what is society and democracy if there is no human dignity there?
And you look at in these stories in this diet, you look at how people actually make it to local teams, the power of the local administrators, from monetary to sexual exploitation to everything is part of this story hugely. So while there's a broadening, the control of those structures to get into a local team that lets you be on the way to the national team. I think your talent has to be so outstanding. Otherwise, in the middle, it is all about who you are connected to, who can put in a word, which politician can intervene in the selection. All your teams, if you look at it, and you are seeing this over and over again. If you examine the performance, it is not a greater democratization. It is that you are also seeing certain teams suffer from the kind of patronage and influence that has put players into those teams, basically. And we all know these stories. Unfortunately, the reportage is not wide enough. Cricket journalism does not look at this part of the story at all, basically.
No, BCCI is a monopoly. Cricket journalism in India is talking about degrees of turn and angles of bat and this thing, and it actually treats cricket as if there is no politics or social phenomena or economic phenomena associated with it. I also have a problem with this whole idea of athletes making it big, etc., because that takes away from the structural problem in Indian society. This is a Reaganite, a Thatcherite view, where you take somebody who's achieved something and project him at the top and say, this guy came because despite being from the lower caste, having nothing, he has come up. And then you are trying to tell that other people who cannot come up are in some cases weaker or lesser people, and you do not acknowledge the structural problems that exist in a society and in a polity where those people are actually being pushed down. So this narrative which you see of people being highlighted as making 10 crores, 18 crores, coming from a bricklayer's family or coming from a sweeper's family, etc., is a very dangerous phenomenon. Basically, because it actually distracts you from asking for social change, for social transformation. It tells you that, okay, this is exactly what Thatcher and Reagan used to say.
It is the embodiment of capitalism. It is the lottery phenomena. It is true in every field. We will look at the Ambanis and Adanis, and every small business thinks that is where they are going to end up. 99.999% are not going to end up there. They are going to be dragged through the mess of India's bureaucracy, its structural problems. The same is true of cricket in some senses. And the vast majority of these stories which make up this heartbreak of cricket, some of it is genuine heartbreak of not being able to break it. Some of it is the frustrating heartbreak of the obstacles that stand in the way of taking part in cricket through these structural problems that the BCCI has done nothing to address. In fact, under Jay Shah, etc., the control of the BCCI is far more about the market and commerce than it is in the team, to the extent now it is getting reflected in the broadening of the base, in the deterioration of the performance of the Indian team itself, if you look at the test matches. So clearly the interests lie elsewhere. Basically.
No, and BCCI is a monopoly. It is not only a monopoly; it has got tax benefits because it is supposedly promoting sport in some sense, and the kind of money that BCCI's honorary posts, those who occupy BCCI honorary posts make is as daily allowances, etc. If somebody looks at the balance sheet, they would be horrified at the kind of money these people make. They're really, it's really, somebody was the other day talking about no state cricket association, which is essentially a way of dispensing patronage to the state cricket association, has a reserve of more than 200 to 300 crores. And their accounting, as Sharda has often spoken about, is so poor. You at least BCCI has to put some account up. State associations have to put no account up. It is a monopoly, and it is a way of dispensing patronage. It is a way of dispensing financial patronage. All the money that is coming in is being dispensed in this manner. And what we see more and more with the rise of people like Jai Shah and others is the whole use of cricket as a tool of this very toxic Hindu nationalism that we are witnessing. And this was particularly visible during the whole T20 or the Asia Cup in the UAE, where some of the most pathetic and obnoxious scenes were witnessed from what a sports team should have been doing.
I mean, the idea that you are going to play a match. I mean, if you have genuine objections to
like apartheid, like Israel 1974 Davis Cup, you will not play.
Don't play it. Get away from it. Yeah. So you want to make the money.
Yeah.
And then you will do the dirty symbolism of not shaking hands. Oh, so the ball coming from there, the bat, the catching, the fielding, all that is okay on the field, and then you will parrot yourself around by not shaking hands, not collecting a trophy and claiming some credit. It is, to me, either the orders come to them from the administration, or these are these players who show themselves to be so shallow and in some senses despicable that they think this will help them with the board because they are looking to please the board. Please, this constant game is being played out, and the nation is a spectacle in which cricket is another way in which the Modi government can elaborate on this propaganda of war, which really the truth does not matter. In this, it is the spectacle that is offered to you and the emotions that you can stir up by withholding your handshake that really count as nationalism.
No, and clearly it had political approval, because when the Asia Cup final took place, Modi tweets about, comparing it to Sindoor. Yeah. Like, I really don't know, as a prime minister of a country, can you really be doing this? Like it is... To my mind, it is like breaching all lanes of propriety or all lanes of decency or anything. Sport actually should not be compared to war. I mean, there is enough talk about it, enough research on it, why you should not be comparing sport to war. And to reduce a cricket match and to compare it to a military operation, and a military operation where the results were rather mixed, as we know by now. The results are not really gloriously on your sense. And that military operation also, the strategic consequences of which are still playing out, are not in your favor. Pakistan has Saudi Arabia as a friend, China as a friend, US as a friend. You are left nowhere except for hosting Putin.
You see it in cricket also. I mean, of course, whether it suits Modi or whether it behoves him, I think there is nothing below, in the sense Modi can sing to a man who can sit in a stadium named after himself and watch a final play out. They can't control everything. They lost the finals with Modi sulking away. I mean, it was such a bizarre spectacle, that whole thing. So you don't have everything yet in control. You don't have the Australian cricket team under your control. I mean, so much so that they wish they had it, basically. And that is where we are at. This comparison, this use of stadiums, of Sindoor, all of it. And this is happening at a time where there's a complete lack of transparency. I think our story on Jai Shah that Sharda did is worth going back to, because it's, I think, the only big story that has been done during this period. I myself remember back in 2004-5 reporting on Jagmohan Dalmia, who was at that time a towering figure, but it was far easier to get information and write about Dalmia than it is today to write about Jai Shah and what is happening within the board. There was more transparency then for all its problems and what happened during that period of time. This lack of transparency resembles exactly what is going on with the government, with every of its institutions, and the lack of questioning. The players themselves have become party to this with their contracts and their managers, etc., as we know.
Yeah, it is very difficult, as we are speaking to sports journalists. It is very difficult to get access to a cricketer now. Cricketer will not talk to you. You have to go through an agent. What kind of a event will be there? How will you focus on that cricketer? The cricketers just don't want to talk. There is no engagement at all, and they are totally controlled by their agents. And their narrative is controlled completely. It is almost like you are dealing with mini Modis everywhere, whether in Bollywood or or in cricket. And Sharda, in fact, was saying that after the story was published, there's not a lot more information that has come out on what was going on. But people have come out and told her, you did not cover this.
Time to revisit
time to revisit the story in a certain sense and particularly look at it. Another funny thing happened a few weeks back. When the Indian cricket team was playing the South Africans in the great place called Lucknow, which has still not been renamed by the Adityanath government. The match could not take place because of pollution.
Of course, and I mean, it ties up the dirt, the haze, everything of it is reflected in that. I mean, pollution is a subject that we need to discuss again, its larger manifestations, but I think it was an embodiment. I also just want to point out something that takes me back to the earlier point. With the broadening has happened, it is also reflected in women's cricket. Yeah. And there was this wonderful victory that took place this year. And I think in some ways, I've encountered a number of people who said it was so refreshing to watch that team and that victory, because that same amateurish spirit of just excitement in the game, of achieving against odds, going out on the field and playing the game was visible. I think that victory is setting us on the path to the same thing happening with women's cricket that is happening with men's cricket. But for that moment, captured in that was something that I think had attracted a lot of people to cricket, and that is absolutely disappearing in some senses.
Yeah, the joy of playing sport and the fun and the connection that you have people and the underdog winning over a over an overdog or whatever you wish to call it. That is what really is the beauty of the sport where it lies. Sport is also imperfect in a certain sense. Sport doesn't have perfect endings all the time, and that is why it attracts people. It is human emotion playing out at its best in a certain sense, but it can also be human emotion playing out at its worst with the tribalism, with the nationalism, the whole militarization of this thing, and the politicization of this thing with the whole toxic politics around it. You look at some of the statements that the Indian cricket coach, the former BJP MP, Mr. Gautam Gambhir gives, and as a lot of people have pointed out, you look at some of the statements that he was giving against Indian Muslims when he was the BJP MP. How do you expect him to have suddenly changed his views after he's become a cricket coach? What he thinks about Indian Muslims, what he thinks about Kashmiris is well known. He has never gone back on those words. Absolutely. So clearly, as a cricket coach, he's certainly not going to become this very great evolved person. And
people who sort of object to cricketers themselves having political views and manifesting them, to me, the great movements of the Olympics and continuing with the American sports today, the black salute, the protest, do we have one example of a single person with conscience in the midst of something far worse happening in India over this period of time, who has the courage or self-belief to stand up and say something? For all the hype around Kohli, at least there was a moment when there was a barrage against Shami that he stood up and spoke. But it is so rare that it sticks in the mind, and it is hardly a political demonstration of something we desperately need in a team that otherwise will depend on, suddenly you remember Sikhs and Muslims and everything else, and nobody's making a talk about these people are anti-nationals or Khalistanis, and they are all playing it. So when you need them to win a game, yes, then everything is okay. But that's even then, there is a problem there, as we know, in terms of this.
Hartush, India's sports person, including Kohli and others, please remember the farmers' movement.
Absolutely.
Please remember after Rihanna tweeted how all these guys lined up to come out in support of the Modi government and targeting so-called foreign people talking about it. And, and a few weeks later, Mr. Modi withdraws those laws.
Absolutely. And so their tweets remain, the laws may have deceived. So these people, and I think in that sense, Sachin Tendulkar is probably epitomizes the cravenness of performance to the government to hang around
power, to
Ambani,
to power, anybody, whether it was
everybody,
all kinds of power.
I mean, is this the best hero that we can encounter? In many ways, you cannot separate the cricket from this kind of public behavior, this kind of public conduct. This is where the game is today. Basically.
No, and if you want to look at how depraved in a certain sense cricket is. You have to just listen to the cricket commentary. Cricket commentators talking about Indian cricket matches, and there is enough from Michael Holding to there is actually a ICC match referee talking about that the ICC is telling him not to punish the Indian players because this would offend the BCCI. But the cricket commentary in particular, it is pathetic. The cricket commentators do not want to forget criticizing the BCCI or talking about Indian cricket. They don't want to even criticize players. It is nationalistic. It is hero building. It has nothing to do with any kind of commentary. It is in some sense what Hartosh would call television journalism and Indian newspapers reporting on Modi. That is being the parallel probably exists with what Indian commentators are doing to cricket, and that's why what you have is now this extensive network of independent platforms and independent YouTube channels, etc., where at least people can freely talk about cricket. So I saw the other day Kunal Kamra and Sharda and others doing this show where they were talking about, at least Sharda has to go to Kunal Kamra's YouTube channel to talk about cricket and talk about Gautam.
And at the same time, not only within the country where we are seeing our spectacular test performances being wiped out twice in a row, on tracks we've selected, backing our teams with spinners and not being able to perform. I mean, it is pathetic, but what is happening internationally in cricket with India's domination is, I think, even greater cause for concern. You look back to the time we were growing up, and now we sound like two old men saying in the good old days. But one of the most glorious stories in cricket is the West Indies team of the 70s. We can name all those players, Clive Lloyd, Vivian Richards, the 4-5 fast bowlers, from the Larry Gomes to the Alvin Kalicharans. We can run through all those names twice over. That made cricket a sport. You had the West Indies taking on the Australians, then the Indians as underdogs. I mean, to imagine Indians as underdogs is something that today's generation, I saw them watching it with some young Indians watching that 83 movie. They couldn't believe that the Indians didn't get well paid and were not disliked in world cricket. I mean, today that is the expectation. I think part of the reason that movie didn't resound with this young generation of Indians is this is not the India they know any longer in some sense. But there's no money going to West Indies cricket, no money going to Sri Lanka. I mean, the Sri Lankans at their best, the player. All this, instead we will prop up 10, 15 nations who will put up diaspora Indian teams and claim this is the broadening of cricket. No money from what is being made and pocketed by the BCCI is going towards anything that makes for the broadening of the game.
And Hartosh, the West Indies cricket team is particularly important of 1970s and 80s because you see Michael Holding came out with that book and that famous speech with, and he spoke to Nasir and this thing. And the cricket team, we've all seen the Babylon film documentary. It is very clear that there is a politics around that cricket.
It is political.
It is political. What they do in England, what they do elsewhere, the refusal to go and play in South Africa, and the treatment of West Indies cricketers who go and play in South Africa, they've been completely made pariahs and completely thrown out of the society completely. It was a political act. It was an act against injustice. It was an act against racism. And that is why that team appealed to us even more. Just beyond the excellence of Roberts, Marshall, Holding, Garner, Richards, Gordon Grange, Haynes, etc., etc. And that is something which is lacking completely in today's India. And what makes me feel really bad is that these people have been created as heroes. And I look at the simple example. The Indian Armed Forces give these honorary ranks to cricketers, Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, etc., etc. And Neeraj Chopra, I don't think that India has had a bigger athlete than Neeraj Chopra, maybe Avinav Bindra to an extent. Neeraj Chopra is a gold medal and a silver medal Olympic winner, world champion, national, etc., etc. There's no other athlete who's comparable to them anywhere in India. That guy was a Subedar. He has very recently been given an honorary rank by the Indian Army. Boss, how is this possible? Because this is something which really pains me, mother. Like, this has nothing to do with athletes. This has nothing to do with athletics. This is just celebrity culture. This is just being on the right side of politics. This is just being on the right side of commerce. Why was the Indian military flying its fighter jets and doing an air show for the IPL final this year?
You know the Indian military better than I do.
No, but it's a rhetorical question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the IPL finals, they wanted to invite the service chiefs to come over after Sindhu talk about. Thankfully, some sense prevailed over them and they did not go to the IPL finals. But I saw the pictures being published.
See, and I think part of what irks them about Neeraj Chopra is one, of course, that he was pipped in the silver medal by a Pakistani. So the spectacle is all wrong. The second, that the Pakistani and Neeraj Chopra both have interacted with each other in a manner that has never aroused nationalism or national feelings. I think he's been forced to stay silent or back away because of the criticism, but his mother speaking about the Pakistani achievement, etc. None of this has anything to do with the kind of spectacle the Modis of this world want. They don't want sport to look like sport and to talk about people performing on the field to the best of their abilities. It has to imitate Operation Sindoor, which, as you have pointed out, we don't know what really it constituted and how much of a failure it was or it wasn't. And yet we want to see our cricket in the same fashion.
True, absolutely. And we, in a sense, as you said, we are diminishing cricket in a sense. The Pakistani team is a much diminished form. You don't have the kind of raw talent which used to come earlier, whether it was Wasim or Waqar or Shoaib or whatever. The West Indies are a pale shadow of themselves. They just virtually don't exist as a team. The Sri Lankans are down. Only what you have is in some sense New Zealand and in some sense South Africa. And South Africa is essentially an appendage of the BCCI right now. What you have is England or Australia and India. And this is not the way to run a sport. So what you will probably have is an IPL, which is where every time a winner will be an Indian, and which is what this current dispensation, the current establishment loves. And then you will have cricket as an Olympic sport, and you want to have that Olympic sport in the Narendra Modi Stadium, where
they still don't control the Australians.
Well, they still don't control the Australians, but they probably that is what
they may be working on it.
Maybe working on it, and probably so cricket is what essentially today's India is. And when you look at cricket, you feel sad, you feel pity that rather than enjoying the sport for what it was, the glory of the sport, we are being force fed with this toxic nationalism, with this absolutely vicious politics, and reflecting the worst that this country has to offer.
The dirt is visible everywhere in match fixing, in betting scandals, over and over again. It has become a dirty sport. I mean, today, for the rest of the cricketing world, they may not articulate it because they're afraid. The dirty Indian is what epitomizes cricket.
Oh yes, the Indians are not liked anywhere, and certainly in modern cricket. And we have not even gone into the whole territory of Mohammad Shami and Sarfaraz Khan being kept out of the cricket team, or the whole question of match fixing and spot fixing, etc., etc. There's a lot more that can be gone into. But in a nutshell, today's the cricket in India today is something which is not something that people like me, at least me, or I can speak for Hartosh as well, can be very proud of. It is something which has put us off sport in a certain sense, and it reflects what is not really the healthiest on the best that India has to offer, the Indian society has to offer.
I think we can conclude on that: a dirty sport run by some people who have the same dirtiness in their conducts.
Thank you, and let's end on that note. Thank you so much for watching.